Hey folks, welcome back to Canadian Cowboy Outdoors. Hey listen, we're going to be setting up right here on these docks. That's right, we're doing a little dock fishing today. And as we go down these docks, folks, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the pro secrets and the tips that you need to catch more fish off docks. So stay tuned for some dock fishing for largemouth bass. Well, as promised, we are going to set up on these docks here and show you a little something about largemouth bass fishing on docks, kind of like you might not have seen before. One of my favorite lures to use in a dock situation is a square bill crankbait. Shallow running, you know, short fat, tight wobble, square bill crankbait. Today we're using, as I said, Rapala BX, the Balsa Extreme Big Brat today, because we're getting late into the summer, and so we're going to start using bigger baits. And the BX Big Brat does it for me. I'm using it in the color called Homer's Buddy. And one of the best ways that I like to go about fishing a dock, most people are always focused on flipping under the dock, trying to get a bait to go under the dock, whether it's a worm or whether it's a Senko or whether it's a flipping jig and craw. They're always concerned about trying to get it as far under the dock as possible, thinking that's where we're going to find the fish. Well, no surprise, that is where the fish can be. But these fish have fins and they can swim. One of my favorite ways to cover a dock is to fish all sides available with square bill crankbait, just like this. So BX Big Brat generally runs, can run 5 to 6 feet of water, but because it's balsa, it floats really well. I'm able to slow roll that sucker, get it down, slow roll it, and have it float right back up to the surface. That's one of my favorite techniques for hooking up with largemouth bass on these docks. I'll fish all 4 corners of the dock. I will get in behind. I can even put a cast up underneath if I feel like it. But the bass I'm looking for are active bass under these docks. They're going to come out and smack this BX Brat as it's making its way away from the dock. I won't spend too much time on a dock. I'll give it a cast around. I do find that a lot of times, so a lot of my fish will come in between docks. So the docks themselves make for great structure for bass. And we'll get into a little bit what makes a good bass dock and which docks are not the best for fishing bass. But in the meantime, we're also going to discuss a little bit about catching bass in between the docks. So the docks themselves, like I said, make for good structure. But there could be always some structure in between those docks that the bass will use for cover just as much. So don't get tunnel vision into thinking you got to hit dock, zip over to the next dock, zip over the next dock, and forget about the structure in between. A lot of times there's going to be a patch of weeds, a patch of cabbage or reeds or cattails that are in between the docks that people didn't clear out because it's kind of no man's land. There can be old pilings, old dock fittings, maybe old barrels, things like that that are out there where a dock doesn't sit now, but maybe historically did sit. And those pilings and fittings create structure for the bass just the same. And also, going around a rocky shoreline just like this, where it does drop off, there's going to be little edges, little drop-offs, and if you're using your side imaging, you can find piles of rocks and boulders that might be sitting in between the docks that these fish can also set up on if they decide that there's a little too much activity on the dock, a little too much action in their Jackson, and they will set up on the spots in between docks. So don't ever forget to cast in between docks like this. I see a nice big boulder sitting in here. There's some trees down straight up there ahead of me. where we recognize that the docks themselves make good structure, there's lots of elements around the neighborhood we can't forget to hit as we go past. There's a fish right there. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Nice bass right off of that dock. Oh, you go. There we go, nice. These are the boys we're looking for. Just like that. All right. There you go, folks. We'll kiss this one goodbye. See you later, fatty. Bye. We're going to talk a little bit about the elements that make a dock a good dock for bass. That's right, there are good docks and bad docks. And we'll show you the difference between the two. You see straight ahead of me right here, metal pilings or metal pillars and a dock that's high out of the water. That I'm going to say is not the best dock for bass. We have a dock over here that's low to the water. It's got a boat lift on it with lots of pillars and lots of cross beams. That dock is good for bass. I just caught a bass off of that one. My favorite docks for bass are low to the water, made out of wood, and have lots of pillars or pilings amongst them. Those are the criteria that make for a good bass dock for me. I like wood docks because wood docks, the wood will attract flora and fauna. It'll grow algae on the wood, which attracts bugs and small invertebrates, which then in turn attracts the bait fish, and then in turn attracts the bass. Low to the water, so that the fish actually get some security, some sunshine and security cover underneath. And also like docks with a lot of footings, a lot of pillars, a lot of cross beams. Or if I see ones like with this Sea-Doo ahead of me that have a boat lift, that boat lift has a lot of cross beams under the water, and that creates all kinds of angles, vertical and horizontal, for the largemouth bass to sort of sit up against and get camouflage against while sitting there ready to ambush their prey. This dock here also has some weeds just to the outside of it, so I'm going to be fishing both the dock and the pile of weeds that are outside of it. These docks are kind of high off the water. The water level has dropped very significantly in this lake, in this region that we're in. You can even see the shoreline, the old water line from the summertime has been up maybe 2 or 3 feet higher than it is right now. So, and also some of these docks have already been brought in for the winter. There's some people that spend a lot of money on a cottage, but they don't spend a lot of time there. Anyways, choice is theirs. You can do what they want with theirs. I do what I want with mine. But I still believe there's going to be some fish hanging around some of these docks, as long as the pilings are out in the water. Some nice big boulders out here in front of me. I can see those. My polarized glasses, so I'm not going to hesitate to make sure I throw a cast over top of those. I don't need to be under the dock to be dock fishing. Like I mentioned before, dock fishing isn't just fishing the actual structure of the dock as you're going down the shoreline. It is hitting structure along shoreline, and docks just happen to be one of those forms of structure. They will hold the majority of fish for the most part. Then there are lots of other substructures around. Boulders, like you can see right there in the water, possibly you can see them. Or if you happen to have a tree laying down, pile of rushes or weeds that are in between the docks. But one of my favorite places for a couple extra bonus bass is straight off the end of a dock like this. If there is some weeds growing at the end there, like a pile of cabbage or coontail, that little bonus spot can hold a couple extra bass for you as you go down the dock. So don't just get tunnel vision on the dock itself, on the structure itself. Certainly make your cast and get your lures up in there. Well, back at it again. Well, I like to remind you folks, like, I don't always just use a square bill crankbait. Of course, I do use some more subtle techniques, some more finesse techniques if I need to around these docks. If I get a hit and a miss and I want to follow up, I always have a nice wacky worm ready to go right there. I will keep, what do I got? I got a jig and a craw handy, chatterbait, also a Ned rig here with a nice Z-Man TRD spinnerbait. All of those baits are at hand. Even though I might say that my initial, fish catching lure is going to be crankbait, and I just threw it in there and caught a fish right off that pile like that, upside down and backwards. Even though I might start with a square bill such as this, doesn't mean that I'm always going to use it. I have my other baits handy for follow-up, or if I know that there's a fish there that I need a little more subtle technique to catch. And like I mentioned, don't forget those spots in between the docks. I just caught that fish. There's a water pump that comes in off of this crib, and that fish was just right off the end of that water pump, sitting there all by his lonesome, looking for a little morsel to eat. This dock here looks kind of nice. I like the wood structure of it. I like the cover it gives. Rocky crib is nice. Like I say, anything that has more volume under the water, the better that the bass are going to be attracted to. A dock with just 4 legs isn't going to be as attractive as one with big wagon wheels, rock crib, weeds to the side, heavy wood top, cross beams, all the elements that make for a good dock fishing dock. And there's a fish right in between as well. Oh, we got a bit of a runner here. This could be a... We'll see who we got here. It's another nice bass. So we got to look for those bass in between the docks as well. We'll flip this dude up in there. Thanks, buddy. Just like that. There's another nice fat one. I think we're going to take a nice picture of this guy. Seems to be photo worthy. Little bass for today. The rod. Like this. And there you go, folks. One more time. All right. We'll put this one back. Back to video. All right, here she goes. I'll see you later. The equipment I'm using today, I'm using another Veritas rod from Abu Garcia. This is a medium heavy 6'9" action. I am also using a 13 Fishing Inception Z reel in the 7.2 to 1 gear ratio. So a little bit fast gear ratio for square bill. I usually prefer a little slower for square bill, so I'm gonna have to just reel like this a little bit slower to get the proper action from my square bill. The reason that I do like a little bit of a faster retrieve on my reel when I'm fishing square bills around the docks, when I do get a fish on, I want to be able to zip that line up, get that fish out and away from that dock. One of the biggest hang-ups, if you want to put it that way, you're going to have is docks getting in the way of your fish once you hook them. The fish are going to head to the heavy cover once they get hooked. And if they're anywhere near that dock, they're going to head back under that dock and they're going to try to break you off, and they will break you off. I'm using 17-pound test Seagar fluorocarbon. Works very well for me in this situation. It's not super heavy, but best part about it is fluorocarbon is virtually invisible underwater. One thing I want to take a minute to remind everybody about when we're dock fishing, we always have to be mindful of being respectful of other people's property. And it's not about a discussion about whether you have the right to fish a dock, the right to fish the water that's under the dock. Of course you do. In Ontario, you know, the law even suggests that people who own these cottages, they don't even own the first 7 meters of shoreline. They have no rights to the actual 7 meters of shoreline. They use it, but legally they don't own it. So that means any dock they put in the water, they're putting into public space. So that dock, yes, it's sitting in public space. It's sitting in public water. You have every right to fish it, fish around it. But people are trusting us fishermen to be able to be responsible and respectful that we don't damage their property while it's sitting out in public space. It's no different than a car sitting in a parking lot. And you don't say, well, that car's sitting in a parking lot, it's in public space, I can run into it with my car all I want. Well, no, you can't. Just because it's in a public space doesn't give you the right to damage property or be disrespectful. So we want to remind everybody, keep your casts clear. If you're going to be flipping under docks or around actual boats sitting in the water, I prefer to use a weedless hook, a Texas rig cross, something that is going to be very, very user-friendly and won't end up hooking up into vinyl or boat tops or ropes or anything else like that. So be very mindful and respectful of other people's property. You do that, we'll all get along, and we're going to all catch a lot of fish off of other people's docks. And one of the great places right along this edge, along this rocky riprap, I'm sitting in 4 or 5 feet of water, and I know right up where my lure's landing is 2. So it's going to drop off, a little bit of drop off, and there could be just the right combination of boulders and rocks sitting here where a bass just might hold up and set up for a little ambush point along this long stretch where there isn't actual dock structure sticking out, but there's actual structure that can be fished. So don't just buzz by it. Throw a lure in there, throw a jig in there, rip a nice X-wrap through there or something like that. Catch that extra bass or two. And there's a fish right there off those rocks. Just like I promised you where he would be. All right, nice one, lift him up. All right, that is what we're talking about. Ooh, getting a little bit tangle-schmangled here. Reminds me of a Disney movie. All right, there we go. Trying to get all the angles here. And nice largemouth bass off the rocks, way out from the docks. Let them go, folks. Bye. See you never. Notice the colors I'm choosing today are going to be light colors, chartreuse. We got Homer's Buddy there. We got a white and chartreuse spinnerbait. We got kind of a black and chartreuse TRD there. White and chartreuse chatterbait. However, you will notice that when it comes to my jig and craw, there I got the Z-Man Turbo Craws right there. And when it comes to the Senko or the silly wacky rig that I'm using there, I'm going to dark colors. So here's a little bit of my pro secret and tip for that. When I'm using a faster moving bait today, it's overcast, I'm covering water, and I want fish to move out from that dock. I want them to cover 2 or 3 feet to come get the lure. I want that bait to be bright. I want them to see it from 3 or 4 feet away, because if they are under that dock and tucked under there, and I'm not casting under there with a square bill, I want them to see it from that distance and come out and get it. If I'm flipping my wacky worm or my jig and craw, or even that TRD there, you see, he's got a black and red back. There's a fish. That fish came way out for that bait. Nice. I want to use something that's a little more subtle in color, that those bass don't have to see from a long distance and chase very far. And there's another one on the square bill off the end of that dock. Just like that. Very nicely done. It's like, probably gonna get another picture of this guy. Around. You notice I always like to take pictures of my bass or my fish. I always like to keep the lure in the mouth. I really do. Even if I just got to hook it in there, and hook it in there just like, like that, that's fine. But what I want to do is when I take a picture, I want to be able to see the lure that I caught the fish on. I want to keep that memory by recording all the elements of that catch. So I got 3-second delay. Nice. And I'm gonna probably flip them around for a little bit different angle. Drop my line. We'll do that again right here. Oh, I gotta get that fish in frame. There we go. Very nice. All right, folks. Another nice largemouth bass off the dock. Go back to video. There he is. All right, we'll see you later. Bye. So another little pro tip I want to share with you guys is about your approach. The approach to the dock in your boat while you're fishing. A lot of people assume that the bass that are on the dock are used to boats coming and going. They just assume, well, because they're living on a dock, docks are made for boats, these bass are used to it. So I can cruise by with my trolling motor the whole time, and I can just make all the noise I want because the bass living there are used to it. Well, my theory and my education and experience tells me a little bit different than that. It tells me that these bass live under the docks when it's quiet. And when those boats come moving in, those bass will slide out and they'll sit out in the weed patch until it's quiet, and then they'll move back under. When the docks are covered by kids and they're jumping off, those bass will slide up underneath that mat or underneath those rock piles, and then they'll move back in when it's quiet. So keep it quiet as much as you can. So my tip for that is get the wind to your back and work a shoreline with the wind. Use your trolling motor to a minimum if you can help it, and it's going to help you sneak up on those docks. Those bass are going to be sitting on those docks unaware that there's a boat in the territory, and they're not going to move off that dock or slide away or go deeper under the dock to hide from you. They're going to stay where they're at, their ambush points, and you're going to be able to access those fish and catch them on the edges with square bills, without spinner baits or chatterbaits, without having to go under the docks as much. Keep it quiet when you're approaching those docks and catch more fish. Oh, I don't know. There could be some weed. Nope, there it is. I knew I was getting hit. And I had to just let it sit and let him grab it. This dude come out of the weed pile. Out from in front of that dock. Nice fish. Thanks, buddy. Kiss you goodbye. See ya. All right. Approaching another good looking structure for docks for largemouth bass. It's not necessarily low to the ground, but boy, does it have a lot of cross angles, a lot of pilings and legs for bass to get in beside and hold tight to ambush their prey. So we're going to cast in and around this. It's got some weeds around the outside of it, which gives them a nice place to scoot to if they get a little disturbed from dock activity. It has lots of good elements for, and there's one right there, for good bass fishing. All right, pull ourselves off of here a little bit. This seems to be a nice bass here. Probably gonna just put this one in the net. Just like that. And there, folks. Nice dock bass. Just like that. There you go. Lovely. And that's how we do it. Well, folks, I'd like to thank you all for joining me today as we explore the mysteries of fishing dock bass. Hope you learned a little something, a little bit of tips and tricks from the pros. I'd like to remind y'all, don't just watch somebody else catch fish. Learn how and do it yourself. Let's kiss this one goodbye. See you later, buddy. All right. Get this untangled. Love rubber nets. I'll tell you what. Well. Maybe there's just one more.